What's the issue you have with globalization? Like, what are some bad things to say about it?
Well, I mean, look, the great example is what we're just talking about here with Afghanistan, is that we believe that we have a set of values and customs and morals and a virtuous framework that we can go and just apply universally to civilizations across the world. Does not work. People are different, and they don't want what we are selling.
Right. You have to occupy for I don't think 3 centuries.
Generations.
I think 4 generations.
Okay, yeah,
Occupy
enough.
their country or their mind.
Enough to have all of the people who remember the old ways pass on.
Dead.
And then the next generation remembers nothing and says, this is the way things are. They've always been.
Right. So that's
20 years
one
ain't gonna
element.
cut it.
The second element of globalization that's no good for everybody is the race to the bottom on wages and environmental standards, which was and I'm throwing environmental standards in as sort of a joke, but that was the argument against the 1999 WTO ascension of China into the World Trade Organization, of which Black Bloc, the precursor to American Antifa, was protesting.
Well, Black Bloc was just a tactic.
Right, okay.
Antifa uses the Black Bloc tactic. So it was leftist activists using the Black Bloc tactic, same as Antifa, in opposition to the World
Trade, right? And their arguments were actually pretty salient. We'll have a global downward pressure on wages. We'll have a global downward pressure on environmental standards. And what happened? All that stuff went to China. And their environmental standards are much lower. Wages went exported all around the place. And what happened? Our entire middle class and industrial, support within the United States has been completely hollowed out and offshored. So, like, globalization, the fundamental problem with globalization is that our cultural way of life is unique to us as a people. It is not universally applicable to every civilization and person around the world. And that is a hubris and an arrogance that we have to get over.
But and you're right. And that's what a lot of these dictators and conquerors all believed. Every single one of these authoritarian dictatorships who are expanding and taking over thought this universal set of values, this set of values we have is universal and can be applied. The thing about the communists that's different from us to a certain degree is that they were like, we'll just kill anybody who opposes us.
Yeah.
The U.S. does that to a certain degree, but they genuinely try to buy people. That's the capitalist approach. Just give them money and comforts. It's really amazing. You give them something to lose. Whereas the communists were like, we'll just lose them.
Right. Well, what's interesting too about communism is that it's like sub-nation state. It's like below the level of nation state. It's a way to unite various factions and people in different nations against the nation state that they're living in, which was what the end of the Westphalian era and the Westphalian Treaty was supposed to be about, which is supposed to be about like nations here not meddling with their ethnic group and there and that nation, and like setting up these boundaries so that the conflicts were actually between nations. But then communism came along and made it so that people across different nations and boundaries could unite around a common cause and become a common faction and because a common problem. Now, that's not, totally notwithstanding all the issues around communism, but that is one of the interesting conflicts it presents with the nation state system as we have it. Now, I think one of the things that we have to appreciate as Americans is that our American way of life, our values, our virtues, our constitutional republic, our representational government, all these things, they're not universally applicable. Not everyone in the world wants it. Not everyone in the world needs it. Not everyone in the world is going to thrive under it. It is specific to us in our context, in our geography, in our history, in our language, in our religion, and our people. And that's why it works for us. It's our thing.
You know what I absolutely loved? There are many things I've done in my life, and there are many things that I've experienced. I'm like, this is amazing. Going to Taksim Square in Istanbul and Istiklal, amazing. Because I'll tell you this. So you've got Taksim Square. Obviously, the riots and the tear gas was certainly experience. I wouldn't call it a net positive. People giving you like lemon juice to like wipe off the tear gas. I don't know if that works. Just made it hurt more. But anyway, so that was an experience. But no, what was brilliant. When the conflict wasn't happening, here I am in this beautiful park with people doing their thing, and there are these really old, like several 100-year-old baklava shops. And you go in and they have all these different kinds of baklava, and it's amazing. So delicious. And they would give you these little things of ice cream with it. And that was something I never got anywhere. I've had baklava in the United States. Not the same. By no stretch. I was there for a couple of weeks and I was gaining weight. I was like, this stuff is too good. It's just drenched in sugar syrup. And the desserts they have, they take like grain and they twist it and spiral it and then pour syrup on it. And that was something unique in that experience. And I love that. walking down Istiklal, this long street. And I'll tell you what my problem with globalization. I had that experience, and the Islak burgers. You know what that means? Wet hamburger. They take the burger, they like dip it in they get it all moist. We got to make these things. They're amazing. It's like lamb, and then it's like they put this sauce on it, and then they steam it, and then they wrap it so it gets soggy, and it's like a buck, and you're all drunk in the middle of the night, and you walk in, and they just take it out of the heater and give it to you, and everyone's just eating them. Amazing. What an experience. And I tell people, like, you ever have like the Islak burger? And people are like, whoa, what's that? It's this unique thing. I went to the Bahamas. Get off the cruise ship. And I'm thinking this is going to be so much fun to bask in the culture that is the Bahamas. And you know what I saw?
McDonald's,
Starbucks, Gucci, Hard Rock Cafe. And I was like, this stuff's next door to me. I don't want to go to the Bahamas for this. Yep. So I had to walk into some neighborhoods and try and find a local shop where they were making local food. And I was like, that's the problem. It's going to be like everybody put on your gray jumpsuit, shave your head. Everything's the same. No matter where you go, anywhere in the world, it's McDonald's and Starbucks. Welcome to globalization. It strips out the adventure and the uniqueness and the decentralization of the human experience.
Agreed. And in fact, we call that global homogenization. And that's something that we think is really bad. And so therefore, I am in favor of globo-homophobia. That's what I'm in favor of.
Homophobia.
I love that word.
Homogenophobia. Yes, exactly.
My problem with globalization is we had a guest on that actually made this point, I think, or you did about someone else that said it, is that it's inevitable. It's going to happen regardless.
It is.
How is it going to happen?
Factually not inevitable.
At the rate we're going, the expansion and interlocutivity of human interaction.
No. Ask Victor.
Interlocutionarity.
Ask Victor Orban if he believes that global homogenization is inevitable.
The point is that I think that it might be inevitable, but how it's going to happen is variable. So there's been a pushback against political globalization. People don't want that. People don't want that in the U.S., the internet. People are terrified of a one world government. So they're going the economic route. They're trying
it's more cultural. It's cultural, like with the movies and the music and the film and the genes and the whiteness and all the things. Those things are exported. You can export them across the pipes. You can, the internet pipes up in the satellites and the whole thing. That's everywhere. Have you ever been? And dude, I have been to third world countries, in backwater villages, up the creek, down the way, where there's like nothing else. But you know what you could get? You get three things. You can get a pack of Marlboros. You get a Coca-Cola. You get a Johnny Walker. You get those anywhere.
Johnny Walker?
Oh yeah, Johnny
Really?
Walker. Johnny Walker.
It's all poison.
I tell you this, man. When being in Egypt during the revolution, you see the McDonald's three blocks away.
Yeah, but that's decades old. That's been everywhere. McDonald's has been in Beijing since who knows how long ago. But the most important salient factor in what we're talking about here is the values. The political values, the personal values, the morals, the virtues, the family structure, all these things that we hold dear. The virtues that the country was built upon. I just spent some time studying with the Claremont boys out there in Las Vegas at the fellowship, okay? One of the things that we really was struck by when I'm reading original texts from the founders, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, all these guys, not only just around the Federalist and the Constitution, but around state constitutions and the discussions around state constitutions, right? So you get real context. It's not just the federal thing. It's in every state from everybody. And they all firmly believed a couple of following facts. One, that you have to build the government like a coat to suit the individual. Okay? It has to be specific to the people. Two, that the American people were a unique set of people bound by language, culture, history, stories, experiences, blood, race, religion, and so forth. And so therefore that the American government was built as a coat to suit these unique people. And we can't take that coat. Tim, imagine if we took my jacket and put it on you.
I'd be really warm.
You'd be really warm, and you'd be swimming, and you'd be half lost in that thing, right?
I could probably pitch a tent, put a stick up, and then just sit under
pitch a tent, he said.
Yes.
Get a little fire going.
So if you gave me your jacket, I put it on, I flex, and I bust the seams out like the Hulk. It's the disaster, right?
Yeah, but it looks cool.
In slow motion.
So this is what our country was founded. This is not just like one guy's idea. This was the entirety of the people founding our country understood that our people were unique, our history was unique, our language and religion and culture were unique, and the government that we built was unique for those people. So this idea that we can take what we have here for us, a special kind of people, and like just universally apply it across the world is asinine.
Well, what about Bitcoin? I mean, I think that we've universally spread a concept globally, where we're globalizing under a currency.
Yeah, but that's just the idea of money exists everywhere.
Commerce exists everywhere.
Exactly. On Earth,
But
it does.
I'll put it this way.
seems to.
I'm 50-50. I think there needs to be strong international ties, but there needs to be sovereign respect. So what I mean to say is there something we can do to make sure that a country's borders, laws, and customs are respected, and we prevent war. We prevent major, serious international conflict and destruction and Havana syndrome or nuclear weapons.
What's funny is that the wars that we have been involved in are because we want to exert our way of life on other people.
I'll tell you. Here's the problem. It's utopian.
Yes.
I think globalization is very, very likely, and the issue is there are people who are willing to die for their ideology or seriously harm others, and there are people who aren't. And, the United States is a bunch of hyper-individualistic, right-wing nut jobs in the middle of the woods with a bunch of guns. And I mean that in the best way possible. I mean, we got a whole bunch of people who are sitting on a mound of beans with guns and be like, I'm not going to bother you, don't bother me. And I'm like, right on, brother.
Yes.
So it's very hard to conquer. That's not everybody, though. There are a lot of countries where they're like, my God is the one true God, therefore, and they're gonna fight and they're gonna attack. And then you have communists who have found subversion to be the powerful method. And so now you might have that hyper individualistic dude who's living in the mountains, who's minding his own business respectfully, peacefully, and he's well prepared. But all around him, the cities are falling to subversive ideologies to submit, to break apart. We have a relatively decentralized system here compared to many other places.
Yeah, by design, yeah.
By design. And so you can subvert that. And that's what communists and Marxists and others have been doing. So ultimately what I see is those who are willing to oppress, lie, cheat, and steal have a major advantage, and they've been winning in that front.
And that's because the difference between what we have here and what they have there, and at least at the time of the founding and for most of American existence, was that the American citizenry was devout Christian. Okay. And so this is the fundamental issue, is that our Declaration of Independence is based on natural law and natural rights, which come from the Creator. And in the Christian belief, the Creator is a monotheistic God. So there's only one God. And if you've got other gods, you're wrong. So we have one God, natural law, natural rights, American constitutional republic. That's the direct lineage in the Declaration of Independence, and that's what everybody at the time thought when they signed the thing. And so if you believe at the same time that there's only one God and that everybody else's God is wrong, well, then there's almost a compulsion to spread that ideology to other people. But I think that what we need to do is just respect the fact that other people have different ideas. And I interviewed Alexander Dugin, the Russian philosopher who pushes his ethnic multipolarity ideas, because he believes that people are different based on their geography and their location and their history and who they are inside, etc., and that they evolve into needing different political regimes. People have evolved to need different political regimes. The Chinese, for example, have evolved in their own civilization, in their own context, with their own everything. So they've evolved their own political regime, just like we have here in the West.
But population growth will lead to borders pressing on borders. There's no free land anymore for the most part. There's some rock, like volcanic rock I was looking at down by Antarctica.
Dude,
that's
I've been doing
unclaimed.
the same thing, trying to find unclaimed land.
It doesn't exist.
You can build islands.
Yeah. Sure. But the point is that we've reached, it used to be like, oh, okay, it's no big deal because there were a lot of places that were just open. And
send them to the colonies. Right?
Yeah, and they're ill-defined territories. So people who are like,
people with claims. Remember when there was just claims on land? Mm-hmm. Well, we claim this and we claim that. No, now there's nations everywhere.
I have a weak claim on your
So now
land.
what happens when China says we need to expand? And as we expand, we need more resources. And we can't get access to resource X because it's not within our borders. Let's go ask them for it. What would you want? We'll not give you anything for this resource, but we have to have it. Otherwise, our people are suffering. When a population of any species grows too large and the amount of resources levels out, everyone suffers. You see it in every overpopulated species, deer, pigs, turkeys, whatever. They become sickly, they become malnourished, and they fight, become aggressive because there's just enough resources to sustain their current level of population. So then what do you think is going to happen to people? When in a country like China with 1.4 billion, they're like, we got to get food somehow. We're importing it from Australia. What happens when these other countries start saying, we're not going to give it to you? Well, we're not going to sit here and die. And now that there's no unclaimed land, someone's going to have to give up what they did claim.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, which is that every other country around the world shares the perspective that I am putting forth right now, which is that there is no universal morality, no universal virtue, no universal political regime, no universal constitution that should be applied, no universal rights, none of it. No one else believes that except for us.
Well, there is a universal thing is economics. It permeates everything. A bank can cut your account. They can remove you. If you want to talk about disrupting the decentralized union of the United States, communism, but banking.
No,
they can remove.
What you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Let's just finish this one thought before we get on to that, which is to say that the Chinese people aren't looking at their Chinese government being like, everybody here needs to be Chinese all around the world. We're going to export Chinese ideology everywhere. No, they're thinking mercantilist. Right. And that's one thing that we haven't woken up to is the fact that China is mercantilist. Their national trade policy is to enhance their national standing and the good benefit to their people. OK, that's why they do trade, which is to make their nation stronger as a nation for foreign policy and national domestic policy issues. But they're not out there trying to say everybody needs to be Chinese Communist Party. No, they're like, we want that food. We're going to go get it, which is a totally different perspective than what we have, which is like we have to end tyranny all around the world.
Yeah, but that idea of ending tyranny is propaganda. It was a way to sell war to people because we want to extract resources.
No, it's definitely not. It's 100% not. It goes all the way back to Woodrow Wilson.
It goes back to the Romans.
It goes back.
They conquered in the name of defense.
I will say, at least in America, it goes back to Woodrow Wilson and the initiation of the progressive policy and modernity and scientific method, and the improvement of everything can be reduced. And we can eliminate evil and we can eliminate disease. It's reflected in the COVID zero policies that people have, especially in Australia and what's in America as well. It's this idea that we can perfect things. So if there's evil out there, we can perfect it.
But I disagree. We did not get involved in Syria because we wanted to bring freedom and Bashar al-Assad was an evil dictator. It's because for a long time we've been trying to build a pipeline, the Qatar-Turkey pipeline, and Syria said we will not go against the wishes of our ally Russia, who says no to this because they want more control through Gazprom, et cetera, et cetera.
True.
And so then back in 2009, The Guardian reported this a couple years later, that the U.S. said we will have ground troops in Syria soon, within the next few years. And then surprise, surprise, as soon as there's an opportunity for the U.S. to get involved and give weapons, it's interesting.
You're pointing out competing factions. Let me say
something interesting. In the American Revolution, the French say we're at war with the British. Hey, these colonists are going to help us. Let's supply them with arms. And then it worked, and the Americans get independence. In Syria, the U.S. sees this uprising, and they're like, and depending on who you ask, by the way, because the leftists will say it was a CIA conspiracy from the get-go, but they see this opportunity with this uprising, and they're like, we should arm some of these people because we don't like Bashar al-Assad. So they intervene to provide resources to the competing faction, hoping that once it topples, we'll be able to build that pipeline. Nothing to do with freedom. Everything to do with opportunistic oil pipeline building.
I agree with that. I think what you're pointing out are competing factions within the United States foreign policy apparatus. You're pointing out factions where people have like monetary interests at heart. But at the same time, there is this progressive ideology in our foreign policy, in our domestic policy, that's reflected in the gender policy and the Marxist policy and the feminist policy and the critical race theory policy, which is all about like perfecting things and making things perfect through science and the scientific method and like eradicating evil and spreading freedom and all the great things that we have all around the country.
Did you see the report from Project Veritas?
About the teacher?
The teacher in California who's got Mao. He got Mao on his wall.
Sure. I have 180 days to turn these kids into revolutionaries.
Yeah. I think this is one of Veritas's most important stories, to be honest. And it's like some random dopey dude. But this is important because, a lot of us are familiar with the goings-on of Google because everyone's got their complaints. The left says, it's a monopoly that won't ban hate speech. And everyone's kind of focused on them and complaining. And the censorship stuff's overt. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.